Alright guys, now we're going to talk about the maxillary branch of the trigeminal nerve. This will cover question number 13 from section C. This won't take too long. I'm going to quickly go over the maxillary nerve, talk about its branches, talk about what they innervate, and then any other notes or significance that is important. And then I'm going to go and reference the nerves atlas and just point out the maxillary nerve very quickly. Okay, now, so as I have said earlier, time and time again, each branch of the trigeminal nerve passes through the cavernous sinus. Now, in case of the maxillary nerve, it's going to give off the meningeal branch, okay, and then it's going to enter the foramen rotundum, okay. Now, real quick, I just want to show you guys the how it's going to look like. Let me just get to the right page. Okay, right here. You see the trigeminal ganglion, okay, and you have the foramen rotundum. You can see, and you see the maxillary entering right through it, okay. Right here, the maxillary nerve. Okay, 1 second. Let me. So here, the maxillary nerve. Okay, and you can see that it's entering the foramen rotundum. Okay, so we'll come back and reference that. Now, going back to the maxillary. Once the maxillary goes through the cavernous sinus and gives off the meningeal branch, it's going to enter the foramen rotundum to give off its 3 branches. Okay, just like the ophthalmic, it has 3 branches. And the acronym you can remember that with will be ZIP. And its first branch is going to be the zygomatic, then the infraorbital, and then the pterygopalatine. Okay, now let's start with the zygomatic branch of the maxillary. Okay, so for the zygomatic branch of the maxillary, it's going to pass through the inferior orbital fissure to go and enter the lateral part of the orbit, and it makes sense because if you think of your zygomatic arch, it's going to be lateral, lateral to the orbit. Okay, and now the 2 branches that it's going to give off also are going to make sense. Now, the 2 branches it's going to give off is going to be the zygomatico-temporal. That's going to innervate your temples, okay? And once again, they are lateral, and they're on the lateral part of your face. Then you have the zygomatico-facial branch, and that's going to innervate the zygomatic arch. And those are the 2 main branches, but then the zygomatic nerve also gives off a 3rd branch. Now, this is interesting and very important because it is a communicating branch which will allow the zygomatic to give off parasympathetic fibers to the lacrimal nerve that will go to the lacrimal gland. Okay? Now, that's it for the zygomatic branch. Now we're going to talk about the infraorbital. The infraorbital passes through the inferior orbital fissure. However, first it's going to give off a posterior superior alveolar branch, okay, which is going to innervate the molars. And then once the infraorbital passes through the inferior orbital fissure, it will then give off the middle superior alveolar and the anterior superior alveolar. Okay, and together the superior alveolar branches, they'll form the superior dental plexus. The middle superior alveolar branch will innervate the premolars, whilst the anterior superior alveolar will innervate the incisors. And then once the infraorbital has given off the superior dental plexus, it's going to enter the infraorbital canal and come out through the infraorbital foramen to innervate your lower eyelid, your nose, and your upper lip. Okay? So basically, if you think about the supraorbital, it's going to be from the upper eyelid to the forehead, and the skin between the lower eyelid and the upper lip, that will be innervated by the infraorbital. So supraorbital above the eye, okay, and infraorbital below the eye, okay. Now we have its last branch, the pterygopalatine, okay. Now the pterygopalatine branch gives off ganglionic branches to the pterygopalatine ganglion. Now the pterygopalatine branch itself is going to be responsible for innervating the, is going to carry sensory innervation from the pharynx, the nasal cavity, and the hard and soft palate. So whenever you think of palatine, go ahead and think of hard and soft palate, and you should also think of nasal cavity and the pharynx, okay. Now let me reference the Netter's Atlas again real quick, because I believe that referencing an atlas helps you understand how the scheme actually works, and not only that, but just gives you a good way to remember the scheme if you ever forget a few parts of it, okay. So you have your you have your maxillary nerve entering the foramen rotundum, but before that it's going to give off the meningeal branch, as I said in the scheme. It's going to pass through the foramen rotundum. Now you see right here, it's going to give off communicating branches or ganglionic branches to the pterygopalatine ganglion, okay. So that's going to be your pterygopalatine branches. Basically, it's not a branch, but it's going to give off ganglionic branches, okay. And the significance, is basically, if you follow, now let's go back to our scheme. If you follow the pterygopalatine, you have ganglionic branches that's going to connect the pterygopalatine branch, or more yet the maxillary, to the pterygopalatine ganglion. The pterygopalatine ganglion is going to give off parasympathetic fibers that's going to go here, here, go up, and going to go to the zygomatic nerve. And then the zygomatic nerve's job is that it's going to give these parasympathetic fibers that have come from the pterygopalatine ganglion, and it's going to give these parasympathetic fibers to the lacrimal nerve that will go to the lacrimal gland, okay? So that's why it's important. And once again, this is why it's always important to look at visual aid, because otherwise I would actually not have figured that out. Now, you have, as I was saying, you have your zygomatic. It's going to give off the zygomaticofacial, zygomaticotemporal. This is the zygomaticotemporal. This is the zygomaticofacial. As you know, they're both lateral. Okay, so when they entered the infraorbital fissure, they went laterally to the orbit. And this is the communicating branch that allowed, you see, from here, the pterygopalatine ganglion gives off these parasympathetic fibers through the ganglionic branches. It's going to go here and here, follow the zygomatic, and then it's going to go to the communicating branch of the lacrimal nerve, and then go to the lacrimal gland, okay? And then you have your infraorbital. Infraorbital is going to give off the posterior superior alveolar branch before going to the infraorbital fissure, and then after it gives that off, it's going to give off the middle superior alveolar, and it's going to go, whilst it's going to the infraorbital canal, it's going to give off the anterior superior alveolar, and in conclusion, it's going to give off a superior dental plexus. And you see how the posterior superior alveolar innervating the molars, the middle superior alveolar is innervating the premolars, the anterior superior alveolar is innervating the incisors, and once the infraorbital gives off the superior dental plexus, it's going to exit the infraorbital canal and come out of from the infraorbital foramen and innervate the lower eyelid, okay, the nose and the upper lip, okay, and that is your maxillary nerve.